get and give a story. And so when she croaked, it was at that period during the pandemic when we were all kind of trapped inside, and I had a pretty dysfunctional family. We couldn't get us all together, and so I decided to run with this story in the obituary section. So I self-published a short story is basically what I did, not knowing, of course, how it would be received. In fact, bluntly, I didn't think it would be received at all. I thought they would reject it. But lo and behold, it was fact checked.
Yep.
And it was published in 4 newspapers. I paid for it to be published in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh Gazette, Herald, I can't remember what it's called now. So the Pittsburgh paper, the Miami Times, the El Paso Times, and the Fayetteville Observer, because those are the 4 places that, but for some reason it was the Fayetteville Observer linked one that went crazy viral, which is so appropriate because that's really where Renee Mandel Corren truly became herself after a lifetime of trial and mostly error. So this book was born out of a short story that we're calling an obituary, and being true to that was the job. It was always my job. I kept it very clearly in front of me in my frontal cortex that anybody who had ever read that obituary better be in a at least in a space mentally when they read this book that it's familiar enough to them. So I wanted to keep those were the guardrails. So that's it.
Yes, it was great, and it was a very strange thing to have people sending me this obituary. Hey, did you hear about this? Do you know about this? And my answer was, I literally FaceTime with Andy the morning they decided to take her off life support. So I was like, yeah, I'm a little familiar with that story, but it was great. And again, people like, your friend's on CNN, your friend's this and that. So it was really amazing to see. And then we'll get to it a little bit. Just what is the bridge from, oh my God, that's so wonderful, to could you please turn that into a book and let it be one of the buzzworthy books of 2025?
I got an agent. I mean, it's really that simple. I had basically been hiding who I was for long enough, too long. And as everybody, most people who know me know, I'm a creator and a performer and a writer. So that wasn't a secret, but I was never pursuing it professionally. And a lot of agents wanted to sign me because one of the things that you find, obviously Carrie knows this very well as an editor, is that an authentic voice is it's a diamond in the rough. Doesn't mean everybody's going to have a book in them, but I got an agent who said, you have a book in you. And then that meant so much because I was already kind of circling the drain in show business. And that's written into the book. My story is so contemporaneously arranged into the book on purpose. This book is not a vessel, for healing, but it is the truth of what happened around the time of my mother's death, which was that I was spiraling kind of emotionally, financially, economically, obviously professionally. I felt like my time in show business had come to an end a long time ago. And when Renee kicked it and this frenzy happened around the obituary, it was clear that I had a book in me. And I was already sort of knitting one together. So I got an agent, and then we got a proposal together, and then we went out to try to sell it. And I was completely foolishly, pluckily optimistic the entire time. And then we sold a book. And that's how I met Carrie. Next step is to bring on this amazing collaborative editor who teaches me essentially how to write a book while I'm writing a book. Like, it's like teaching a pilot how to fly a plane while they're flying a plane. So it was definitely like a lot of bluster in the beginning. But this incredible experience comes about because I got an agent. It's that simple.
So as someone who has known you, who has directed material that you have written in LA and eventually here in Nashville, has featured your stories in my series, I know that you are a gifted writer who should be recognized at this level. But you have mentioned, like, Mom in her passing gave you the gift you always needed, which
Yes.
was that one step in.
Yes.
So people went, hey, what do you got, kid? Rather than you knocking on the door going, no, I'm good, I swear.
No, one of my brothers said it, so I can repeat it. He was like, well, she finally did something right. She died on time. And in a way, like it's kind of true, right? Like it's never too late. Of course, it's never too late. This could happen to me at 60s, 70s, whatever. It's never too late to tell your story. But it was long overdue for me to stop putting everybody but myself first when it came to talent management.
Yeah.
And again, it's part of the book. It's built into the DNA. The kind of person that she needed me to be is who I became. And that's really hard to quit.
Yeah.
That is a really tough, you're talking about identity. And, a lot of therapy, a lot of gin, a lot more gin. And, ultimately when she died, because it was such obviously when your parent dies, it's so powerful, it's so primal. But because it was so public as well, I felt I had maybe been through versions of this with other clients. And I thought, well, Andy Corren, you've seen this. You get one shot when you walk through that door. And, this is your shot. And so I burned the boats. And some people in show business know this, but I also wrote my professional obituary, which 2 weeks later after my mother died, I wrote my own obituary and published it in Deadline. So I had to basically say to the world, I am no longer a talent manager. I'm never doing this again. I am a writer. I am focused only on this one thing. And I had to first say that, of course, to myself. This is before getting a book deal. This is before having a proposal. But I knew in that moment that it was such a profoundly unique opportunity to tell my story that I had just better walk through the door that she kind of kicked open. And again, she did finally do something right.
Now, Carrie, in order to ask you how you could harness this wild hair writing style, I do think it'd be helpful to go ahead and hear some of it so that we understand the challenge that was this beautifully honest, but just heading in many directions all at the same time.
Oh, yes.
Style
I
of
have
writing.
to say I'm fine with it, but nobody knows more about me than this woman to me. It is so weird how much information she possesses that could destroy me. It is insane because, when you write a book, you're writing 5 books, it's a constant trial and error. And so Carrie is in possession of all of the filth. I just want to get it. So I'm going to read a section that I've been reading on this tour that it seems a little counterintuitive to go towards the end of the book, but spoiler alert, she dies. And so, and it actually ended up being kind of ghoulishly appropriate to read her deathbed scene. So to give you all a kind of a quick primer, the first 2/3 of the book takes place in Fayetteville, North Carolina, over about a decade of just truly spiraling shittery, where Renee can't really do anything right. And the last part of the book is us assembling 34 years later for her death in El Paso. And so some of these names if you haven't read the book, you'll be hearing for the first time are all my brother's real names. So, I'm Jew Boy, and my next brother is Twin. The brother after that is Asshole. The brother after that is Rabbi. And the oldest brother is Bonus. And so everybody knows Asshole on the Outer Banks. I'm not making it up. So, sorry. So anyway, this is the story, the true, unbelievably, ridiculously ham-handed, idiot true story of the death of my mother. El Paso, Texas, Saturday, December 11th, 2021. What I did for love. I did what I felt was necessary. In the end, I had to hurt, lady. I'm not proud of it. Sometimes dying is ugly, and beautiful people get hurt because of that ugliness. Lady is still not speaking to me, and Renee's been dead for an hour. By 11:30 that Saturday morning, Renee was disconnected from all of the machines that had tethered her to El Paso, all but a quiet monitor for her failing heart, which labors mightily through the ever smaller peaks and ever deeper valleys. She is no longer getting enough oxygen. It is nearly over. Her end is in the room with us, and soon the woman called Renee Mandel Corren will no longer be. The answer to so many, many months and years of pain, loss, and illness is right there in the room. We can all feel it. Twin is shellacked with grief on his camera phone, pasty white and staring bleakly off to the side, wishing no doubt he was anywhere else or back on the phone with her, shooting the shit about nothing at all. Asshole stays completely silent, stoic and hiccuping with tears. I think he's even praying. I know I can hear Shirley praying. Two wounded hearts reeled from far away into this grim room, this painful task that he, her shepherd for so long, must see to the inevitable and terrible finish. Rabbi whispers softly. He's wearing a yarmulke and holding a white leather-bound prayer book, and he's pacing intermittently, throwing anxious glances between his mother's muted heart monitor and the more muted ESPN above her bed, which is rattling off NBA scores and power drink commercials. Bonus sits in a deep chair close to her bed, his tall self now collapsed over hers, his full head of bushy, white and black hair bobbing up and down like a fishing lure on a lake made entirely of dying mother. I'm the one at the foot of the bed managing. I'm adjusting the Bluetooth speaker so it plays Sinatra just right, my way, her favorite, so Renee can hear it on the way out. I'm spraying rose and tea rose scented oil from Target all up and down the pink quilted blanket, giving my mother the rose red carpet treatment she expects and deserves for this, her very last dramatic exit. A good death, Anne. Good work, son. Lady, my supremely kind, surprisingly hilarious, and Baptist as hell sister-in-law, Mrs. Lady Bonus, is on Renee's left side, close to the window, which beams hazy El Paso morning light into our Target ginger jar lamp shadowed room. She's doing what comes naturally to a fine, upstanding Baptist woman from Vernon, Texas at times like these, times of trial and mercy and surrender, doing what she's called to do. I'm down at the foot of the bed, lightly massaging my mother's feet for the last time. Renee, you take his hand, Lady Breeches. You take it. That's Jesus's beautiful hand, Renee Corren. And if he is holding that hand out to you, you take his precious hand, my darling. You go on and take it. Lady cries out, bidden for the marked down soul of my bargain bin Jewish mother, my wickedly scabrous, profanely funny atheist mom, this irreligious, indiscriminate inhaler of porn, trash, sacred cows, and shellfish. Lady wants her to take the glowing, outstretched hand of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, lady! I can hear Renee saying, now at last I cry. I am weeping lustily and forcefully, gales of grief and tears, but also I am choking back peals of swallowed laughter, garbled sobs mixed with hysteria as I imagine my mother, every grand rabbi's mortal ham-eating nemesis, taking Jesus Christ's lovely hand, imagining what Renee would think of all of this, of Lady, who Renee just loved, praying over her dying body. And what would she think of Rabbi, spitting a few bars of the prayer for the dead, rocking back and forth, davening old school Jewish style, spontaneously invoking the mourner's Kaddish. It's something I have only heard spoken aloud in this family once before, and that was over the body of a dead dog named Licorice Cat back in 1978. The Hebrew incantations merge with the weeping of Bonus, my gigantic mystery brother with his big broken heart and a lifetime of bad breaks, now folded up in an agony of surrender and release, covering his mother's body. Twin and asshole are crying too, and we are all united, joined as one, brothers, a family at last, in this unbelievably messy, calamitous, mournful, and now suddenly, utterly, hysterically funny last breath in the life of Renee Mandel Corren. She is passing. She is going away while Frank Sinatra warbles in a corner, her broken sons naked in their pain before her in the soft rose-colored light of a Target lamp and the flickering glow of the NBA recaps spark and glitter down upon us all. And I sprayed and I sprayed and I sprayed the smell of roses for Rosie to follow out and into the next world. It was all of it, so perfect and holy, so perfectly Renee. Except for the Jesus part. You just take his hand and you let him bring you on home, darling. You take Jesus's hand, Renee. He loves you so much. He loves you. Take it. Do not be afraid. Take it. Take it. Lady seizes Renee's hand in a fierce grip, enthusiastically clutching into her breast, praying hard alongside her husband, who is crying over his fading mother's final breath, letting her go at long last, letting his separation from Renee and his family go along with her finally, at last, this time. He is the one letting her go, and it means so damn much to Bonus. You can feel it. My mother's breath begins to seize and hiccup, her mouth gaping, her breath ragged as that lure and line sink to the bottom of that shallow, flat lake. I know there is not a single moment to spare, and so I leap from the foot of the bed, and I vault to my mother's side, and I yank Renee's right hand as though I am about to conduct a tug of war with the vicar of Christ himself, right here in this room, and I shriek wildly at my generous, lovable, absolutely indispensable sister-in-law, screaming in a blind, raging fury as I raise my mother's limp hand up and I say, she is not taking Jesus' hand, lady. If she's taking anybody's fucking hand, it's Sammy Davis Jr.'s. I bawl, using all that expensive New York therapy and quality, low-budget Southeastern regional actor training to bring the room to a complete standstill. We have silence. We have Sinatra. We have the mourner's cottage. Renee sips her final breath, her struggle ending as the last chords of My Way and the last phrases of Rabbi's keening mourner's Kaddish, Yit Barach, V'yish Tabach, V'yit Tapahar, V'yit Taromam, entwined in an odd and fitting, irreligious challah of a funeral hymn for my odd and irreligious, always famished mother to feast upon at her funeral buffet. She dies beautifully. She dies noisily. She dies surrounded by her people and by pretty things purchased on credit. She dies her way. I am confident that the very last words Renee Mandel Corren heard on this earth were her gay son screaming, Sammy Davis Jr. and her fuckwit son whispering, Omein in Hebrew. Amen. Omein.
I'm glad you took it easy on your voice. They came in with the 1/3 approach. No, that's fantastic. So thank you for that. And then
God, I wish that wasn't true, but it's I just wrote what happened.
well, that is my question for you, Carrie. Editing a memoir is specific because even if I swear it's all true, doesn't mean it still makes the story. Doesn't mean that people are going to receive it. There are some, so how do you approach kind of corralling something that is kind of careening here and there with very specific and intense emotions and references and otherwise? How do you make it so, like, I want to represent your voice, Andy, but I want people to also hear your voice?
Oh my. So it was funny because we went through different drafts where we found what the story was.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, what we thought it was the story of the brothers.
Yeah, I had a
longer history.
Yeah, I had an idea. This is my favorite thing I have to tell because people are like, what? That's how it works? I thought it was gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna tell the story of each of my siblings in order of birth. That's how I'm gonna tell my mother's story, because I was being so literal about like, oh, they want a book about my mother, so I'm gonna do a biography about Renee and Corren. So I was gonna do a funny gay Jewish version of the brothers Karamazov. And I was gonna call it the brothers Karamazov, and you were amazing, so patient. And then when I turn in for the first time, they're like, "This is what we're going to try this thing." Of course, Colin, who's the at the publisher, is like, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that." So, but yeah, it's a lot of trial and error.
But then what we found is that it's a story of your family when you were young, the breaking apart of the family, and then at that scene, how the family comes back together.
Yes, it's a family's journey of staying together through hardship, coming apart through life, and coming back together through death.
Can I say too,
Please.
with Andy, one of the funniest and most wonderful things is I could say to him things like, okay, we don't have much between the years of high school. Do you have something from when you were living in the Outer Banks? And he's like, well, there was a time I was in the Cabbage Patch pirate ring. And that is the amazing thing about Andy. So do you mind telling people a little about the Cabbage Patch pirate ring?
I don't
This
mind
is
it.
one my, like, many people would hang their hat on that.
Yeah, I had it's one of my favorite stories. I almost read from it because it's just a tiny bit like out of context. It doesn't quite make as much sense. So there's a story in here called Burning Bridges, which I just love. I love how it all came together. It's one of my favorite things, how it all came together. But it's the true story of when me and my brother twin kind of just divorced Renee, and we decided to go live with my sister on the Outer Banks. Of course, we thought we were being super clever, but turns out my mom was actually like giving my sister like part of our child support. So she really just ransomed us to this one-eyed pirate queen on the Outer Banks. My sister had one eye. And so then I get involved. By the way, my sister didn't like Tom and Ted. And so then I get involved because my sister is so felonious, and it doesn't really matter. Like, just steal it. It doesn't matter. It could be yours. It doesn't matter. She was a thief. And so I get involved through my sister with pirating through a layaway box at the Roses, stealing Cabbage Patch dolls, and then she's reselling them because they were like worth hundreds of dollars more than what they were retailing for. And then I got arrested. I'm the one that got arrested. And so I don't want to tell too much of that story.
No.
But
it's for the book. But that's something that Andy has in his back pocket. As just sort of a by the way.
Yeah.
Can you fill in the year you were 16?
Would this work? Oh, yes, that would work.
We can work with that.
I know it's a little plain, but how is it that you two are put together to work? Did they feel like, oh, Carrie will be able to handle Andy, or otherwise?
So Andy has an in-house editor, Colin Dickerman, who's impeccable and amazing. And then I am hired by authors outside to guide them, and his agent actually put us in touch.
My agent put us together. And so that relationship it's so crucial, because if you've never written a book before, which of course I hadn't, even though I'd written tons of material over the years, plays, short stories, you name it, screenplays, obviously, loser. And so my but my experience with writing books my experience with books is just purely as a fan, and I'm a reader. And so, but I've never had undertaken even the craft of writing a book. And so fortunately, I was sort of thinking about this already, but it was my agent who put us together.
And then I don't know if this is inappropriate to talk about other projects of yours, but I'm just curious if there's something about you that puts you in a good place to sort of work with particular memoir material. Is it true that you're also working with the thing?
Pardon?
I was gonna say, maybe they don't want, sometimes you just don't want them to know.
So you seem to have a gift for working with difficult life material with humor and yet a rawness. Is that just something that has drawn you, or you'll just like to work with whatever is put in front of you?
I do like working with a particular kind of book. The thing with Andy is he's so funny,
Yeah.
but he really wanted the book to be good. It wasn't just about, can I get something and slap it between covers? He wanted something that was actually beautiful. And that's what I enjoy working with. I enjoy working with people who have a unique voice, but who also want to push the book to be something that we would go back and forth. I think it's the only time I've had both Vladimir Nabokov and Judith Krantz be a regular part of our edit meetings.
I wanted to do for Fayetteville what Vladimir Nabokov did for St. Petersburg. And I do think I've succeeded.
I think you did too. I think you did completely. And we would go to St. Petersburg and then go to Fayetteville.
I wanted Fayetteville to come alive in a way, like the same way that he brings Vira, his family home, alive.
So I have a specific Asheville.
Meanwhile, his corpse is clawing its way out of. How dare you?
Asheville specific question. But I'm just curious, we just take a few seconds. So again, this isn't just any stop on the tour. This is where you live, and you do have some Asheville connections.
Yes, I do.
Just either of you speak about what Asheville. Why did you choose to live here in Asheville? Why did it mean so much to come back to do an event here in Asheville?
I just want to say, from a very early age, I knew that Asheville was my soul in North Carolina. So that's just, facts. I even auditioned for school when I auditioned for School of the Arts here in Asheville. This is where I had to drive from Fayetteville. And I remember at the time, my brother Rabbi drove me in this Camaro that he built that broke down. And like literally, I just remember thinking like, God, it's so far away. And this was in 1987. This was in March of 1987, the first time I came here. And I remember coming here to audition for school. And even then knowing like, this is my place. And when Jenny Bunn and Susan brought me here into, I don't want to say the year, it makes me feel so old. So, but when they brought me here with the play, I really kind of crystallized in the early aughts. It really crystallized for me that there's really just no other place in North Carolina that I feel so at home. So as you know, I dragged you here thinking that I myself would move here, but I'm not done with Asheville. My story is an ongoing story. I don't know when it will end.
Okay. Carrie, how is it that Asheville is now your home?
I have lived here since 1995.
God, that's crazy.
I used to be a barista here at the bookstore. And it was at its old location. I think I was the worst barista we ever had. And so it's such a pleasure to be here tonight. Not making terrible cappuccinos. This is I've been coming to Malaprops for decades.
Wow.
And it's just a beloved institution.
And I remember coming here like, moony eyed and like, oh, someday, you know what I mean? Really walking around that feeling of wanting to really belong in Asheville, specifically through Malaprops. So yeah, it's really special to be here.
It was the first place I would circle and like touch things and
All that is great to hear. So then my Asheville specific question here in the land of Thomas Wolfe and Look Homeward Angel and otherwise, you have dared to revisit specifics of real people and real things. Has there been pushback? Has there been people who really wish you hadn't summoned them in your stories?
I don't think
Are there people who are like, how come I'm not in it more?
I mean,
or that's just me.
The only person who I think
Volume 2.
Yes, unfortunately, yes. As I explained, unfortunately, you had to be cut out of my sister's ultimate scenes. I had I had some choices to make, and one of the biggest choices that I made in the beginning was to just tell the truth. That's really, really hard to do. And it's in my epigram, one of my kind of guiding kind of mantras is that the truth should also not get in the way of a great story. And so and so everything is true. Some of it happened differently or at different times. And so, but everything is true. Everything is a true thing that happened. So it was very, very important for me to tell the true story. That sometimes meant telling stories that didn't reflect well on my mother. And I had to, really just live with that, be okay with that. That's a hard third rail to touch because, it's your besainted mother, but I feel like it's all true to who she is. And so the only person I think who would really not like their portrayal is Shithead. And so Shithead is what we call my father. And so in the book, he is every book needs a villain. And, he certainly made himself one very early in our family's history. And so Shithead is the only person who has, I think, kind of a bad profile in the book, but it's only because of, acts. I don't really get to know him until after she died. Right. I met him 4 months after my mother died. Yeah, that was sticky.
I also think a challenge on top of what you were talking about, Tom, is you were writing this while you were grieving.
Yes.
Like not from a perspective of 15 years, 20 years.
Yeah, really wild.
Yes.
It was so fresh that the piece that I just read you was quite literally the last thing that I wrote. That was, I truly wrote that at the very, very, almost kind of like under the, rifle of a deadline.
Of Colin.
Yes, because it was so clearly that had to be written. And I think I just put it off as long as I possibly could. And it poured out. It's actually one of the kind of, not like it was edited, obviously, but one of the more near perfect things that kind of came out. I don't think any of my brothers have read it. I did send it to each of them. And 2 of them have not read a book since 1972. One of them didn't finish it. I asked Rabbi, I was like, what's the last book you read? He goes, Charlie and the Tullivan. And I was like, oh, that's a great book. Let's talk about Charlie. I didn't finish it. And I was like, what year was that? He goes, 72. So I don't think, I think eventually I do think Asshole and Twin and Bonus will read it. I think it's really hard for them for a variety of reasons. Sure. Not because it's unflattering, but it's litigating a recent trauma, and they're not as examined. They haven't looked inward deeply as I have.
They didn't get that expensive New York.
They didn't get that expensive Southeastern regional actor training.
Want to turn out to some other questions now,
Yes.
But my last thing I would say, did you ever feel?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the virtual audience can't hear unmiked.
Oh, okay.
So if you could share the mic.
Oh, okay.
Can do. Did you ever feel it was your place to say, Andy, you sure you want to bring that up? You sure you want to share that about you or someone else? Was that ever, or you're like, that's not my place? I'm just here to.
Oh, it's totally my place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think. I mean, I never did anything illegal. I mean, I did a lot of stuff illegal, but I never confessed to a murder.
The other thing is, Andy's very, very funny, but to talk about you as if you're not here, you're a deep humanist.
Isn't he great?
He's
so
great.
funny.
He's so awesome.
But I feel like the portraits of people are so loving. I do sometimes when I feel like someone has anger in a book that they haven't examined, and I think they will later regret it.
Yeah.
But I think as far as saying the truth, if you're coming at it from a loving place,
Yeah,
I think it belongs in.
That's nice. I had moved through before she died. I love telling the story because it's so fucking her. We moved through forgiveness. I had to. She drove me insane. She drove me insane, especially towards the end. And at one point before she died, I don't know, this must have been 6 or 7 months, I was visiting her for her birthday. And I said, by the way, Renee, if you need to hear this, I forgive you. And she doesn't miss a beat. She goes, I forgive you too, son. Thanks.
timing
Yeah.
from. Yes. All right, so yeah, we're just about the time. There's about 15 minutes left of our time together. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Andy or Carrie about anything, now is your time to do so. Someone here in the first row is raising a hand and getting things going. Be ready to follow up with them when we finish. So right here in the first row, what is your question? Nice and loud.
This is a very silly question, just to warm it up.
A
Yeah.
silly question. We love silly
Yes,
questions.
a silly question. When this book gets optioned, if it hasn't already been optioned, who would Renee want to play her? Who do you want to play Renee?
All right, so the question is, should the book get optioned? Who would Renee want to play Renee?
Yes.
So it is optioned. It doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to a little outfit called Fox Broadcasting Channel. So Fox Entertainment optioned it off the proposal. So, you know, that's kind of normal where they like read Publishers Weekly and they swoop in. That we've had some very close calls on development, weird process, you know, with COVID strikes, everything. It's just been bizarre. I'm not super involved in that because I've been trying to write another book. So who Renee would want to play her?
Uh-huh.
She would love Jessica Gunning, Baby Reindeer, to play her. I just got my teeth cleaned and it was like super like science fiction teeth cleaning place where they have like an iPad over your, you know, chair while they're doing your, you know, your mouth is in the guards and stuff. And so I don't have Netflix. So I was finally able to watch Baby Reindeer and I was like, Mom, Mama, is it you? So she's pretty great. And there's an amazing actress who I actually did tell Fox about named Bonnie Milligan, who won a Tony for Kimberly and Kimbo. She's so good. She is so my mother. She's just hilarious. She's a ball-breakingly funny, confident lady who probably will never do TV because she's so booked up for Broadway for the rest of her life, as she should be. And a big, big, big theater star. But as soon as I saw her in Kimberly Kimball, I was like, oh my God, like, it's so exactly my mom's energy. And then Lizzo, obviously.
On the notes.
Any other questions from here in the room? Stephen in the back.
You said you didn't confess to a murder.
So we asked, Andy didn't confess to a murder. Why was that a specific word choice?
So thank you for listening closely and for attending tonight's reading. And this press conference is over.
Well, I will follow up with that, which is, we probably do find out about this, but knowing that you did sort of manage the end of her life. And then the decision of like, it's time,
Yes.
which your brothers did not agree with. I love the quote of like, what are you doing, dude? Just turn on the Steelers game and she'll be fine. But what was it to make that decision of like, no, it's time to go ahead and pull the plug, to use a sort of simple term?
You definitely do feel when you are placed in that crazy position, which she did place me in, which she didn't tell me. I only found out when I got to El Paso that I was her, that her medical directives were all going to come from my signature.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. And everything was a surprise because she was a wreck. She didn't prepare for death. How was it? Yeah, you do feel a little bit like you're killing your parent, but I don't want to give too much away. Fortunately, I did not have to ultimately make the decision because she was able to give her assent to her directives, and which was great. But no, there was definitely that moment of like, okay, so I have come to El Paso to kill my mother. Cool story. Yeah.
And that is a stop on the tour. El Paso, yes. Any other questions from here in the room? Yes, right here in the first row. Go ahead.
Okay, so it sounds like the emphasis of the story above and beyond the mother is, the brothers and the brother relationship. And you mentioned one sister. Are there any more?
So the question is that there's reference to the brothers and one sister. Is there more than one sister?
No, Renee had 6 kids. She had a devastating miscarriage. She had 2 abortions that we know of. And of the kids, my late sister was the oldest, and I was the youngest. And it was all boys.
Other questions from here in the room? Go ahead here at the second row.
Why did she spell her name that way?
Why did Renee spell her name that way?
Renee, Renay, was a mistake at the hospital where she was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. But her mother, Marion the Hungarian, and her father, Isidore, were too embarrassed to correct the mistake because, back then they were both old world Hungarian Jews who probably just were too shy or too, cowed, for lack of a better word, to correct a mistake made by an administrator in a hospital. Because they did say Renee, and I was told, but unfortunately they were too shy to correct it, so it was Renee. Why? That's what she was stuck with.
I joked about El Paso being a stop along the way on the tour, but I'm curious, what is it to go back and revisit some of these places? So Fayetteville is sort of a character in the book, and you got to go there, you got to go to the bowling alley. They celebrate, she's one of ours, and you're like how do they refer to you, as like an alley kid or something? So how is that to go back to some of these places and have people celebrate the memory of your slightly difficult mother?
During the writing of it, I spent a lot of time in North Carolina, and I think that's informed the writing and informed the detail. Going back to Fayetteville is mostly going back to a place that doesn't exist anymore. It's primarily in my memory because Fayetteville is 10 times the size of it is, when I lived there. Most of the places that I talk about are, long gone, but B&B Lanes is still there. So what it was like to go back, because we had her funeral on her birthday after she died at B&B Lanes, and that really was my first time back in a long time. It was really 34 years, and so, which is crazy. I know that sounds insane, but when we left, we left, and I write about that as well. How I guess part of our trauma response is once the doors close, you close it. And that's an unfortunate side effect of how we were raised. Going back was a healing, and I think it was necessary. I found my voice. I found my history. I found a lot of amazing, hilarious stories about my family. I reconnected with my whole Fayetteville tribe, and in a way. Obviously it's still very painful. I wish she hadn't died. I wish she was healthy and still here and hanging out and us having a great time. But one of the nicest gifts of this whole experience is that she gave us, by becoming so infamous in death, she really reconnected her far-flung family of loves and friends and admirers. So it was incredible. Now, I didn't go back to El Paso that many times because it's El Paso. And but my brother is still there with his family, and so I am going to make a stop there on this tour.
Great. Any other questions? Straight back. The aforementioned Jenny Bun.
Jenny Buns.
Curious, did you always call your mom Renee, or did you call her like mom or mommy or something like that? And did you switch?
The question was, did Andy always refer to Renee as Renee, or was there a time earlier where she was mom or mommy, and then if so, when did it become Renee?
I found it very helpful in the writing of the book for keeping characters straight to use names. I found it also allowed me a little objectivity to describe abhorrent behavior. So that was definitely, emphatically deliberate in the book. In real life, we absolutely called her Renee, but not all the time. She was still definitely Mom, Mamacita, Rosie, Renee, Ray, Red. She was a lot. She had different names for everybody. Mostly in kind of conversation, it would be like Ma or Mom, but Renee was very normal when things were like being discussed, like how to spend jail money, important stuff.
Other questions right here? Go ahead, please.
So I find this quite interesting, just how you were able to unravel some of these stories in your life, because I think about my mother, and I have a stepmother and their friends, and very just really complicated life. And so I've always been, you put it in a box and you put it away. And so just thinking about how to unravel all that, because how did that come out? I mean, was it therapy or, or did you always keep it in the back of your mind, but just to figure out things that happen, it's complicated when you have complicated mother.
Question was to Andy's process on kind of unraveling the complicated history. And was that something that had always been in motion, or did it come in these last few years when you realized, oh, I have to do this?
So remember when I told you that the first draft Carrie and I were working on was this silly gay Jewish brothers, Corren Motzoff. So in a weird way, even though our editors is yeah, no, we're not doing that. It ends up being incredibly helpful to organize your thoughts on the whole history of this woman, the biography. So, and some of it did end up getting used. There's actually a paragraph that I love so much about her wedding dress, the French tulle. I love it so much. So to answer your question, it is, of course, a collage. It's incredibly complex. A life is complex. A life is not one decision. A life is not one location. I mean, if it is, who wants to read that book? So ultimately, the prism through which I wanted to tell this story was a series of beshittied houses that she carried us through in Fayetteville for 10 years, and how we managed to survive as a family barreling through these beshittery. And that the consequences of being raised like that would then be revisited as a family for whoever was still alive 34 years later as she lay dying, which is precisely what happened. I had the gift of actually just telling, the truth of what happened. The complexity that you're asking about, the putting it all together, I had amazing, trusted people who could keep the whole book in their head and say oh, you remember that story that you were talking about like that? Wouldn't that be interesting to put here? Or let's try to slot that here. Or because eventually when you do decide what your book is, because it isn't clear in the beginning, it's just a bunch of stories. When you do decide what the story is at the heart of your book, it all kind of comes in for a landing. Does that make sense? But it isn't very clear in the beginning, and you just have to be okay with mess. You just have to be okay with a big old mess.
Hand signals are letting me know that we have time for one more question. Is there one more question? Otherwise, then
I will offer the one last question. You mentioned the time in which this happened. Why during the quarantine times and otherwise was that obituary, that honesty, the kind of story that people needed right then, to borrow a Seth Meyers phrase? Do you think this book would have been, or that obituary and then the resulting book would have been as well received at any other time? But was there something about isolation and otherwise that the honesty and the peeling back of things people really responded to?
We were in the first year, had just finished another whole year of pandemic. I think a lot of people had died by December 2021. We were all kind of shoved back indoors with another scary wave. And it was before the holidays when a lot of people couldn't get together or weren't getting together or still doing Zoom Christmas with grandma and grandpa. And we couldn't say goodbye to a lot of people. And I think for some reason I managed to hit the zeitgeist of saying goodbye the right way. And, saying goodbye to Renee was never going to be black and white. And